She was one of the most beautiful faces to ever walk the runway. In the dazzling world of 90s supermodels, where fame sparkled, cameras never stopped flashing, and every move made headlines, Karen Mulder stood out. With her icy blue eyes and angelic smile, she seemed like the very definition of perfection. But what the world saw was only the surface. Behind the designer gowns and million-dollar campaigns was a story far darker than anyone imagined. This is not just a fashion tale, it's a haunting reminder of what happens when fame, pressure, and silence collide. Karen was more than just a pretty face. She was a global sensation, walking for fashion's biggest names like Dior, Chanel, and Valentino. Yet behind the spotlight, she was quietly breaking. While others saw glamour, she was silently struggling, with fear, with control, and with a voice that no one seemed ready to hear. In an industry that worshipped beauty, Karen's pain became invisible. The more she smiled for the cameras, the more lost she became behind them. Her fall didn't come with scandalous headlines at first. It came slowly, quietly. Whispers. A strange interview. A sudden disappearance. And then, a shocking confession that stunned even the most hardened journalists. What Karen revealed would challenge the fashion world, shake the media, and leave many asking, how did no one see this coming? This story isn't about gossip. It's about the price of silence, the weight of trauma, and what happens when someone dares to speak out after years of being ignored. As we trace her rise and fall, one question remains unanswered. Was Karen Mulder trying to escape the industry, or something far more sinister hiding within it? In the early 1990s, Karen Mulder was everywhere. Her face filled glossy magazine covers. Her walk lit up catwalks in Paris, Milan, and New York. Alongside superstars like Naomi Campbell, Claudia Schiffer, and Linda Evangelista, Karen was part of the elite group that changed the meaning of the word supermodel. But while the others seemed to embrace the spotlight, Karen's relationship with fame was complicated. She was soft-spoken, shy even, and often looked uncomfortable during interviews. Many brushed it off as modesty, but in hindsight, it was something more, a quiet warning hiding in plain sight. Born in the Netherlands, Karen started modeling as a teenager. Her beauty was undeniable, and it didn't take long for scouts and agencies to notice. Success came quickly. Too quickly. She was barely out of school when she was thrown into a world where money, power, and image ruled everything. She was suddenly surrounded by people who told her what to wear, how to walk, how to smile. There was no room for doubt, no space to slow down. And if she ever hesitated, there were always others ready to take her place. What most didn't realize was that Karen was quietly slipping away behind the scenes. She began showing signs of stress. Some close to her said she was becoming distant, emotionally fragile. But in an industry obsessed with appearances, those signs were often ignored or hidden. She continued to show up, smile, pose. Her contracts kept coming. So did the pressure. Rumors started to swirl. Some said she was exhausted. Others claimed she was just being difficult. But no one really asked why. And then, something shifted. Karen vanished from the public eye for a while. When she reappeared, she was no longer the same woman. She spoke differently. Her eyes looked tired. And then came the interview. One that would leave people speechless and set off a storm across media outlets worldwide. She didn't just share stories, she made claims that were so disturbing, so unexpected, that many didn't know how to respond. Some dismissed her. Others believed her. But one thing was clear, whatever Karen had been holding in for so long had finally reached a breaking point. And once it was out, there was no turning back. When Karen Mulder sat down for that now infamous television interview in the early 2000s, the world was not prepared for what she had to say. Her voice, though soft, carried a weight that unsettled viewers. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her tone. She simply spoke, with chilling calm, about manipulation, betrayal, and experiences that shattered the pristine image the fashion world had built around her. She made serious allegations, claiming that powerful people in the industry had taken advantage of her trust. She said her cries for help were ignored, that her attempts to escape were silenced. The media, unsure how to respond, labeled her unstable. But behind those headlines, many began to ask, was this really a breakdown, or was it finally a breakthrough? As Karen's words spread, the fashion world closed in. Former colleagues distanced themselves. Designers who once praised her talent stopped mentioning her name. Major outlets either downplayed her story or painted her as delusional. But there were a few quiet voices, industry insiders, assistants, even fellow models, who admitted off record that the things she spoke of weren't unfamiliar. Whispers of control, mistreatment, and power abuse had always floated around the modeling world. Karen just happened to say them out loud. Her family, especially her father, stood by her. He believed she had been deeply hurt, emotionally and psychologically, by the people she once trusted. But even he struggled to pull her back into a stable place. Karen had already been in and out of clinics. She spoke about being given medication without fully understanding why. There were reports she had been hospitalized against her will. Some said she was trying to expose a truth too dangerous to share. Others believed she was caught in a spiral of paranoia. But the deeper you looked, the harder it was to tell where truth ended and trauma began. There were moments when Karen seemed to retreat, disappear from the world completely. And then, she'd surface again, fragile, distant, but still holding on to something only she could see clearly. Her story had become more than just a personal struggle. It was a reflection of an industry that glorified beauty but often hid its ugliest sides. The real question wasn't just what had happened to Karen Mulder, but how many others were still silent, afraid, and unseen. The more Karen tried to speak, the more invisible she became. Doors that once opened for her with just a smile were now slammed shut. Industry figures who once called her a muse avoided her completely. Her name began to vanish from fashion archives and media features, like someone had pressed delete on a chapter they no longer wanted to claim. But Karen refused to disappear quietly. Her story wasn't just about what had been done to her, it was about what the world chose not to see. She began writing, speaking in fragments, trying to piece together her memories, her truth. But every time she reached for clarity, the weight of her trauma pulled her back into isolation. Behind the scenes, tension kept rising. There were whispers that Karen had named people in private conversations, people who were still active in the fashion world. Some journalists who tried to investigate further found themselves cut off. Editors were warned to stay away. A few began asking, was there something bigger at play? Was Karen's story not just personal, but part of a pattern long buried beneath luxury branding and flashing lights? Her mental health struggles became public, but the full story never did. Headlines focused on her instability, her breakdowns, her odd behavior. Very few stopped to ask what had pushed her to that point. Meanwhile, Karen seemed to teeter on a fragile edge, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost. But underneath all the noise was one undeniable truth: she had seen something, lived something, that had changed her forever. And no matter how much she was dismissed, she wouldn't let it go. As years passed, the mystery deepened. Karen made fewer public appearances. She withdrew completely from modeling. Some said she was rebuilding her life. Others believed she was still fighting something no one could quite understand. A few brave voices in the fashion world quietly admitted that her claims were never fully investigated. And those who looked closer began to notice that Karen's story echoed others, stories that never made headlines, experiences that remained buried. Now, with fashion finally starting to reckon with its past, her name is beginning to resurface. But not in magazine spreads or runway retrospectives, in conversations about accountability, silence, and survival. And still, one haunting question remains: what truth did Karen Mulder try to expose, and why did the world work so hard to shut her down? Just when the world had almost forgotten Karen Mulder, a surprising twist reignited her story. In a quiet corner of a French magazine interview, published years after she had vanished from the spotlight, one short paragraph caught the attention of investigative journalists. A former fashion executive, who chose to remain anonymous, hinted that Karen wasn't the only one who had tried to speak out. He claimed there had been others, models in the same era, with similar experiences, who were quietly paid off, silenced, or pushed out of the industry before they could speak. His words weren't direct accusations, but they carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. Suddenly, Karen's story didn't feel like an isolated case. It started to look like the tip of something much darker. As journalists began digging, new pieces of Karen's past began to surface as documents, recordings, diary entries she had written while undergoing psychiatric care. Some were fragmented, but there was a clear pattern. She had been trying to document everything. In her own words, she wrote about being pressured, manipulated, and told to keep secrets. She described moments that didn't seem like the fashion fairy tale everyone believed she had lived. It wasn't just about a single traumatic experience, it was about a system that protected the powerful and erased the voices that dared to challenge them. One entry, dated months before her most public breakdown, mentioned a name, someone high up in the fashion world at the time. The name had never been linked to any wrongdoing, but it raised questions. Why was Karen writing about this person? What had happened between them? And why had no one ever followed up on it? When journalists attempted to contact this individual, they were met with silence and legal threats. The deeper they pushed, the more resistance they faced. Meanwhile, Karen's closest friend from her modeling days, someone who had also left the industry early, came forward in a private interview. She didn't go on record, but she confirmed that Karen had confided in her back then. She said Karen had been terrified, not just of what had happened to her, but of what might happen if she told the world. According to her, Karen believed she was being watched, that certain people were trying to make her look unstable so that no one would believe her. It sounded paranoid to some. But with everything that had happened, it suddenly didn't seem impossible. Now, the stakes were even higher. This wasn't just about Karen's personal pain anymore, it was about a possible cover-up, years in the making. And the fashion world, long praised for its glamour and creativity, was starting to look like it had secrets buried beneath all that beauty. The silence that once drowned Karen's voice was starting to crack. But still, no one had taken accountability. And the world was left to wonder, if her story was true, how many people helped hide it, and why? Continue from where the climax left off and write 400 words wrapping up the story. This part should provide a satisfying resolution, answer any remaining questions, and conclude subplots. Leave the audience with key takeaways or reflections, making the ending memorable and engaging. Naturally, include keywords to keep the SEO optimization strong. End the story now in natural way. Also, do not make any headings. Only write story in paragraphs. Also, keep the wording simple in natural tone. Also, make the script human-centric and don't give feel of AI generated. Also, don't create violated content which can affect YouTube policy.